On April 26, 1986, reactor unit number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. Steam explosions that could lift a space shuttle rocketed thousands of kilograms of radioactive material into the sky, and this deadly detritus would go on to contaminate over 100,000 square kilometers of Western Europe. This undeniably was and still is the worst nuclear disaster in history. At the time, just 2 miles from the explosion, nearly 50,000 people were living entirely normal, even privileged lives in the city of Pripyat, an atomgrad that was a jewel of the Soviet Union. And these lives continued on as if nothing had happened for 36 hours after the explosion, until a fleet of 1,200 buses under the command of Soviet authorities evacuated the city in under 48 hours. Young families, brilliant scientists, and the Soviets' best engineers were told to only take the bare minimum: identity papers, documents, food, and clothing. No worries, they would be able to return in 2 to 3 days. But no one ever did. Pripyat's current levels of radiation will prevent resettlement for at least 24,000 years, which may as well be forever. Today, Pripyat is a town frozen in time, a unique freeze frame of a developing disaster, and today, I'm taking you inside. Because of its gross, ubiquitous contamination, Pripyat today is unsuitable for human habitation. Paradoxically, this makes it the perfect place for some people to visit. I, along with a team of scientists, engineers, and nuclear experts, were lucky enough to spend a few days surveying Pripyat with the goal of learning what an environment like this is actually like, of going beyond what you see in breathless headlines or sensationalized YouTube videos. It's simply something you have to experience in person. Chernobyl's dead city is really the only place on Earth where you can see and study the aftermath of a disaster on this scale. Most people don't ever get to see what I hope to show you. Pripyat is featured in everything from documentaries to TV shows to urban explorer videos to movies to video games, but our group was here with the explicit permission of the government of Ukraine and the power plant itself, and so we got the kind of access and information that most don't. But make no mistake, we weren't just wandering around the exclusion zone, and we weren't scaling crumbling buildings or going anywhere radiation safety would prohibit. We were shadowed at all times by power plant personnel to make sure that didn't happen. The first thing you notice about Pripyat today is that it looks nothing like the kind of wasteland you've come to expect from post-apocalyptic media. Buildings still stand, trees are growing, insects are scurrying along concrete, healthy-looking dogs follow you around knowing you probably have a snack. To understand Pripyat now, you first have to reframe it in your mind. It's not a green glowing hellscape. No, it's a snapshot of what a town looks like 35 years after humans suddenly and unexpectedly deliver land back to nature. Founded in 1970, Pripyat was an atomgrad, a closed city designed by the Soviet Union with the explicit purpose of serving the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. As this plant was poised to be among the world's most powerful nuclear facilities, Pripyat attracted the best and brightest that the Soviet Union had to offer. Young scientists, engineers, and other experts flocked to the city like young aerospace graduates might do today with a company like SpaceX. The town's streets were lined with one of the founders' favorite flowers. For a small town of 50,000, there were 25 stores and malls, 27 cafes, cafeterias, and restaurants, a culture palace, a cinema, a school of arts. Residents could enjoy 10 gyms, 10 shooting galleries, 3 indoor swimming pools, 2 stadiums, 1 park, 35 playgrounds, 18,000 trees, 33,000 rose plants, and 249,000 shrubs. There were 15 kindergartens and elementary schools, and 5 secondary schools. The average age in Pripyat was 26. All of this youth, culture, and talent ended up leaving Pripyat in less than 48 hours. No one ever officially returned, and they likely never will.
If I told you that I was coming to the satellite city of Pripyat, of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and you thought I'd be encountering some sort of nuclear wasteland, I hope that you can see I couldn't really be more wrong. There is contamination, about 2 times higher than background, back on the road right now, but it's undeniably beautiful out here. In October, the weather is nice, trees are changing color, there's abandoned buildings and hot places that you don't want to be, but this is also the hike of a nuclear physicist's dreams. It's really something to behold, not exactly something to fear.
Pripyat undoubtedly has an odd beauty to it. Images of it are now iconic, from children's dolls left behind to this specific pool, the Azure swimming pool, a structure so compelling it makes it out of the exclusion zone routinely and into some of the most successful pieces of media on Earth.
If any of you are Call of Duty fans, you'll recognize that this pool is recreated down to the windows in Call of Duty Warzone. Pripyat is not a war zone, but the reach of its iconic disaster imagery has a similar impact. Even though we are in one of the most iconic places when it comes to nuclear disasters, even though we are in the place that you see in all the pictures about Pripyat and Chernobyl, I'd like to point out that we are still not that much higher above the background rate of radiation that I'd have in my own home. Yes, we're 2 or 3, 4 times higher, but nothing that's going to immediately injure us and cause us bodily harm. I want to point that out because every single person that I told I was coming to this place asked me if I'd come back radioactive or glowing. But that's just not how radioactivity works. It comes from particles, not just an aura of evilness or any kind of thing like that. But the effects of radiation leaves behind, there is something to it. Places like Pripyat get all the press. When people are looking up what happened after the disaster, they see images of the gas masks and the abandoned buildings, but they don't see places like this, places that existed outside of Pripyat where people were living the same way for 100 years with no electricity, with no running water, and undisturbed by everything else that was going up around them. And then one day, someone came through, probably a soldier, and told them, "You have to go." And they left everything that they ever knew, and that their families ever knew.
The dozens and dozens of towns surrounding the Chernobyl nuclear power plant are now technically abandoned, but that doesn't mean that no one's coming through, and it doesn't mean that the locations and the areas don't change. Routinely, those who call themselves stalkers will move throughout the exclusion zone, give themselves messages on their own message boards. Here we see it on a children's chalkboard here in what was a school. Sometimes the military will come through and they will use these abandoned buildings for target practice. A lot changes in the exclusion zone even after people are technically gone. Behind me, what I'm inferring from the evidence that I see, broken place bottles in the schoolhouse, bullet holes on the wall. What was a children's schoolhouse was now a live fire exercise for the military. Obviously, there's still a lot of beauty here in Pripyat. You look at what the city has left behind, and you think of when the city was thriving, housing tens of thousands of the Soviet Union's best and brightest. All of these amenities, all of these lovely pieces of art, all these buildings, all these places that other areas of the Soviet Union simply didn't get. You see the lengths they went to make this new model city something to really behold, to be the satellite city of what would have been the most powerful nuclear facility in the world. Ironically, the most famous of Pripyat's amenities was never used. This, the city's Ferris wheel, is probably the single most photographed object in the exclusion zone. It too has made it into mainstream media like Call of Duty, and it's easy to see why. Reactor Unit Number 4 exploded just 5 days before the inauguration of Pripyat's amusement park, where the Ferris wheel sat, and residents were excited to christen it during May Day celebrations. Those celebrations never came. The wheel is now a symbol of what could have been, of a life robbed of levity, a splash of yellow against a jungle of concrete, aging metal, and dense old forest growth. Today it stands idle, broken, and vandalized as not much more than one of the go-to photo opportunities for disaster tourists. If Pripyat's rusting Ferris wheel endures as a symbol of what the city could have been, the city itself, though crumbling, stands as a testament to a nuclear-powered future that never was. As the Soviet Union rushed to become the world's leading nuclear power, plants sprung up throughout its territory, and the propagandized slogan, "Peaceful Atom," became a popular refrain in and around atomgrads like Pripyat. The words, "Let the atom be a worker, not a soldier," looms large atop one of Pripyat's tallest buildings. The letters, now rusted and yellowing in the sun, cast a shadow on the city, which is itself in the shadow of the corpse of the power plant, only 10,000 feet away. The Chernobyl disaster didn't have to happen. The test that was done on the reactor was an obviously dangerous one, and the reactor itself was obviously flawed. Operators were tired, overwhelmed, some unqualified. The programs were pushed, rushed, forced by a government that sought nuclear domination at all costs. It was not the inherent danger of nuclear power that killed Pripyat. It was a disrespect of it, an unwillingness to give an inch of ground in a race to have the most powerful nuclear reactors in the world. And the city has now only just paid 35 years into a toll of 24,000. If all the crowded trees hadn't replaced the flowers, if the pavement was uncracked and the Geiger counters never started clicking, if the cinema was full on a Friday night, if local soccer teams still packed the stadiums, if children still played in the playgrounds, if young families had gotten to grow into careers as world-leading scientists and engineers, if life never left Pripyat, it's almost painful to imagine what this city could have been in a nuclear future that never was. To be continued.